In today's lesson, we are going to make an image show up on the screen, and we're also going to talk about local and global variables, and in that context make our image move around the screen. So last time we talked about local variables. Today it's going to be focusing on global. So we're going to create our program. And we're going to take it and open it up in our editor. And once again, make sure you always place a comment at the very top stating the name of the program, who's it created by, on what date, for what, and what it actually does. So our program is going to display an image and move it around. Another thing we're going to do today is remove that little status bar that shows up on the top of our iPad so that we have a full screen game. So to do that, there's a method called display. Set status bar. Notice it went blue. And it's going to display hidden status bar. So if you save that and rerun it, you'll notice now the status bar is gone. So we have a full screen game now. So last time we created local variables, and today we're going to create two of those. The first one is going to be a background image on our iPad so that we have a full background image on our screen. So we're going to call that variable background image. And the method to make that show up is called display new image rec. Notice turn blue, and it actually takes several parameters. Now the first parameter is where does this image show up? So to begin with, we need to go get the image. So if you go to today's lesson and scroll down to the bottom of the screen, I've added a little zip file that actually comes from this website Lost Garden, which freely gives away their artwork, so this is completely legal. And if you download that and open that directory up, you will notice that there's all kinds of images in there, and there's one actually called background. So we're going to take that image and we're going to copy it. We're going to go back to our solution. There's the three files that we had before. We're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it images. And oddly enough, we're going to paste all our images in there. Since we're doing this, we're going to grab our next image that we want, and there's another image in here called beetle ship. And we're going to take that and we're going to use it as well. So we're going to take it and put it in our image folder. So this is common practice of having a folder for images. Later on we're going to have a folder for sound as well, and you might have another one for sound effects. So this is common practice. So now that we have our images, if we go back to our editor, first thing we have to tell it as the first parameter is where the heck is this thing. So inside quotes, it's going to be where we currently are, which is main, and the Unix command for that is /. So historical reasons we're going to use that. Then there's a folder called images. That's what we just created. And then there's a file called background.png. And you end up with quotes. PNG is the preferred file type for all of our images, and we're going to keep using that throughout our whole lessons. The next thing we put is how wide and how high it is, since we might be dealing with Retina display iPads, we're just going to make it the big size. So this tells you how big it's going to be. We're going to take that, we're going to copy the exact thing because the next command is quite similar. Next thing we're going to do is actually put that beetle ship on. So we're going to call that my image, and we're going to change the name to beetle ship, and the size we're going to make that is 400 by 400. The next thing we're going to do is we don't want the beetle ship showing up at the top right hand corner, which is what happens to the image if you don't tell it where to go. We want it to show up in the sort of the middle of the screen. So we're going to take my image and its X position, so if you remember back from math class, the Cartesian plane, and we're going to assign it a value. So we're going to place it at 400. And we're going to take the same thing, my image and its Y value, and we're going to place it at, let's say, 500. So this should make the background image show up, our beetle ship show up, and it should show up partway across the screen. So if we save that and go back, there's our background image, and there's our little beetle ship. So it's that easy to get an image showing up, but we want the image to actually move around. So to do that, we're going to need a couple things. The first thing is a global variable. I'm going to have one called scroll speed, and I'm going to assign it a value of 1. And you'll see why in a minute. So what we need this for is we can change this and it will speed up or slow down depending on how we do it. So that's useful in a game. You might want a global variable to be how fast the character can move, and during the game you might want to change it. Now you notice that the only difference between a global and a local variable is local variables have the keyword local in front of them and global do not. So once again, only use global variables if you need to. Every other time you should be using local. The next thing we need is something called an event listener. Now, event listeners are things that the program listens for, obviously, and when they occur, it goes off and does something. So the one we're going to add is a runtime event listener, and we're going to add the event listener. And the thing we're going to listen for is something called enter frame. So each time Corona decides to repaint our screen, an enter frame event happens. So every time our screen is going to be updated, we want something to happen. And what we want to happen is a function called move ship. So this thing's going to happen over and over again. If that's going to happen over and over again, we should make a function, and that's what this is. It's a function name. So you'll notice it's different from a variable name because it starts with a capital letter. So we're going to place our function name here. Oddly enough, it's going to be a local function, and you put the name, and then inside brackets you put that it accepts an event. Every function should have a beginning and an end. So what we want to happen is every time Corona enters frame, it's going to make this happen, which goes up here, and we want our ship to move over slightly. Basically that means we want this X value to increase. So we want that to end up being something. Now we want it to increase by scroll speed, so at the beginning it just happens to be 1, but we don't want to actually just set it to scroll speed because then the image will move over to the X position of 1. What we want to happen is take what it currently happens to be and add the scroll speed to it. So that's an introduction to event listeners, and oddly enough, how to make your own functions. So now when we save this and go back, you'll notice that our little beetle ship is moving along. If we want it to go faster, all we have to do is go up to our global variable and change it. Now you'll notice he moves a lot faster. So that's an introduction to global variables. Difference between local and global, oddly enough, is the keyword global. Also, we learned how to make a rectangle show up and put an image in it. And we learned how to have an event listener and make it do something over and over and over again. And that's all that we're going to do today.